Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. Let's begin. This should be our finale. This should be the last shiur that we have in 2 years, over 2 years of learning the Masechet. So let's go. We have a few topics left. I want to make sure we have enough time to cover ground, and then Be'ezrat Hashem, at the end of this year, we're going to speak a little bit about planning for the siyum of this group that's been learning together for 2 years. Baruch Hashem, we should really celebrate it. So we ended off last shiur reviewing our Mishnah. There's a few points of the Mishnah that I'd like to remind us, and then based on that, we're going to get started the Gemara's analysis. So scrolling back, the Mishnah is on Lamed Gimel, and the Mishnah is as follows. The Mishnah, the topic that we're speaking about is someone, let's say he prayed, Misha Birech. Someone already prayed, but he didn't blow the shofar. So this is the Mishnah here. It's on Lamed Gimel Lamed Bet. It says Misha Birech ve'achakach nitmana lo shofar. Someone prayed the Mussaf prayer on Rosh Hashana, as we've been speaking about. Someone prayed the Mussaf prayer on Rosh Hashana, but he didn't have a shofar at the time. And now, afterwards, he got a shofar. Okay, so let's say you weren't going to Bet Knesset. Let's say it's the times of Corona or whatever it is. The guy is at home, prays by himself. He didn't have a shofar. Now the shofar comes. Tokeya umeiriya v'tokeya. He does the tekiya, teruah tekiya. Shalosh pa'amim, 3 times. As we spoke about, that's the minimum requirement. That's what it tells us. So it says that if you prayed Mussaf without the shofar, so what do? You blow the shofar. Very simple, but we're going to now take what's the implication of that. But while we're here, we'll just finish up the last line of the Mishnah, because that's going to be the next analysis. But it says here, Keshem sheshliach tzibur chayav, just as the CHAZZAN is chayav to read the Mussaf prayer and to read all prayers really, kach kol yachid v'yachid chayav. So too, every individual has to pray himself. This line of the Mishnah is asking the question of, when you go to the Kanisa and the CHAZZAN is going to be reading the Amidah, do you have to read it yourself? Or what we call the lachash, right? Tefillah belachash, when you whisper. Do you have to say something? Or is it enough that he's saying it? So this opinion, the first opinion, the Chachamim say, Kishem shesliach tzibur chayav, just as the CHAZZAN has to read it, kach kol yachid yachid chayav, so too everyone else has to read it. Rabban Gamliel Omer, Rabban Gamliel says is a big chidush, which we're going to discuss. Shaliach tzibur motzi et harabim yidei chovatan. He fulfills your obligation for you. So this is going to be a discussion that we're going to have, and it's going to go a lot back and forth of what exactly does that mean? Does that mean, according to Rabban Gamliel, you never have to pray? What exactly does that mean? Okay, so the first line is the line of Misha Birech. So now let's go to 34b2 in the art scroll. On the screen, I'm going to go to the section of Misha Birech. We just read that line of the Mishnah. Here it is. Misha Birech ve'achakach nitmana lo shofar. Someone prayed the Mussaf prayer. Then afterwards, he got his shofar. Tokeya umeiriya v'tokeya. He does the tekiya, teruah tekiya 3 times. That's what Mishnah said. So now the Gemara says, hold on a second. We're talking about one person, right? Misha Birech is a single. It's not a group. It's a single. It says that the single prayed, didn't blow the shofar, so afterwards he gets it to blow the shofar. I have a question for you. If you're a single, should you blow the shofar during your Amidah? If you're not with a minyan, and let's say you have a shofar, and you can blow the shofar, or you have a friend that blows the shofar, do we say that the shofar should be part of the Amidah for a single, or just for a minyan? You get the question? Obviously, we know that when you have a minyan, the shofar goes as part of the Amidah. For the Sfaradim, that's what we do. But if you're a single, do you do shofar as part of your Mussaf or not? That's our question, and we're going to try to see. Someone tell me, what's the implication of our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says, if you as an individual prayed and you didn't have a shofar, then afterwards you find the shofar, so blow the shofar afterwards. What does it sound like? Then you should do it with the Amidah, if you're an individual. That's what it sounds like. So that's what the Gemara is going to say. Tama de lo havale shofar mi'ikara. The Mishnah implies that why didn't you blow the shofar before and you're blowing it afterwards? Because you didn't have it before. Havale shofar mi'ikara. But if you had the shofar before, ki shama, when would you listen to the shofar? Aseder berachot shama. You would listen to it as part of the Mussaf prayer. So the implication of our Mishnah is that if you are an individual praying Mussaf, your shofar should be combined with your Mussaf. Okay, so I'm going to go to this, just taking some notes here, making David Delmani's work easy. If you are praying without a minyan, should you blow the shofar during the Mussaf prayer, or is that only a requirement for the tzibur? for the minyan. So the Mishnah implies you should blow shofar. You should blow shofar afterwards. We're keeping the flow. You should blow the shofar as part of the Mussaf. Yes, correct. Even an individual. Okay, but now we have a problem because the Gemara tells us Rav Papa bar Shmuel kam netzaluye. Rav Papa, the son of Shmuel, one time was praying by himself. So he got up to pray Mussaf. Maybe he was sick, he was home. Amar le l'shameh, so he had someone working for him. He had a shamash, as they call it. He had a shamash there with him, and he says, Ki nahir nalach, when I signal it to you, takali, that'll be the time that I want you to blow the shofar. I'm going to pray, and when I'm ready, I'm going to point to you, you blow the shofar. Okay, so what does that sound like? It's an individual, and what's he doing? He's blowing the shofar, he's having the shofar blown during his Amidah. Amar le Rava says, Rav Papa, what are you doing? Lo amru ela bechever ir. That only applies if you have a group in the city, meaning if you have a minyan. There's no requirement for you to blow the shofar as part of your Amidah prayer if you're an individual. So that is telling us, Rava is explicitly telling us against what the implication of our Mishnah is. And then the Gemara says, not only is it Rava that tells us this, it's an Amara, but even a Braita says this. Tani nami acheh kishu shom'an ala seder. When you hear the shofar, you should do it as part of the prayer. You should do it in order. Tekiyah, Torah, Tekiyah. Ve'al seder brachot, and you should hear it together with the tefillah, with the brachot of the Mussaf. When does that apply? Only if you're in a minyan with the city. But if you're not a part of the group of the city, meaning you're not part of the minyan, shoman ala seder, you have to listen to them in order, meaning Tekiyah, Torah, Tekiyah. But not as part of your Mussaf prayer. So this is a perfect question for Corona. When during that first year, if there was no minyan, what would you do? What the halacha and what the Braita is telling us is, you don't have to have the shofar during the Mussaf prayer. It doesn't have to be connected for an individual. Here's another rule that the Braita just ends up saying, if you're an individual and you didn't blow the shofar, you can have someone blowing the shofar for you, which we will learn is obvious because the mitzvah is to hear the shofar. But if you have an individual who did not pray Mussaf, you cannot have an individual praying for me. Right now, what this is telling you is that if you're an individual, you can indeed, as an individual, have someone blowing the shofar for you, but you can't have someone reading the Mussaf prayer for you. Okay? So now, let's just pause here for a second, looking at the screen. If you're praying without a minyan, should you blow the shofar during your Mussaf prayer? Again, coronavirus. You're not going to minyan on Rosh Hashana. So on that day, when you're not blowing the shofar, when you're not going to minyan, you're going to pray Mussaf. Does the shofar have to be as part of your Mussaf? So the Mishnah seems to imply that you should do the shofar as part of the Mussaf. And that's indeed what Rav Papa told his shamash, said, I'm going to point to you and you blow the shofar for me during my Mussaf prayer. Rava corrected him and said, you don't need to do that. And also the Braita said, you don't need to do that. When you're an individual, you don't need to have shofar together with Mussaf. Okay, so now let's just go back to the fact that if the Mishnah implies, what's the implication of the Mishnah? The Mishnah says, you're an individual, you didn't blow the shofar, and you get a shofar afterwards, so blow the shofar afterwards. The implication of the Mishnah is that you should have done it beforehand. So this is the way that Rava and the Braita explains it. Normally, if you're an individual, you should do shofar before Mussaf. Ideally, if you're an individual, you should first hear shofar, which is what we do. We do the shofar before Mussaf, and then go pray Mussaf by yourself, if that's what it comes down to. So this is the implication that we say, how even though the Mishnah implies this, actually others will say that Mishnah does not imply this, and that's what we're going to say the halakha is. If you're an individual, your shofar does not need to be together with the Mussaf prayer. Okay, let's pause for questions. Yes?
You say do shofar, you mean like just that, it's called like the resets?
So the mitzvah has evolved.
Yeah.
So biyachid, again, The mitzvah of shofar is you need to hear 3 teruot, and each teruah has a tikiyah before it and tikiyah after it, which we spent the whole daf explaining where we got those sources for. 3 teruot, 3 broken. Let's teruah will define very simply as a broken sound. You need to have 3 broken sounds, and each broken sound is preceded and followed by an unbroken sound, a straight sound. Tikiyah, teruah, tikiyah. So if you have to do that, that's a total of 9. That's your minimum requirement. And as we said, what's in the middle, there's 3 versions. It could be a genuche ganach, a sighing sound, which is what we call a shivarim, do, or it could be a yelule yala, it's the crying, that's do, or as Rabbi Abahu enacted in the city of Caesarea, which we ended up taking for all of Israel, even though he did it just for his city. Rabbi Abahu's institution was to do a combination of ganuche ganach v'yilulei elal, shivarim, teruah, which is what we call tashrat. So minimum, you're only required to do 9, but since there's 3 versions of that, that ends up to being 30. So Ita, your question is, when I say do it, what do I mean? I mean the 30. But how did you get to the 30? You really have 3 teruot with the before and after, and there's 3 versions of that. So that's how you get to the number 30. So yeah, ideally, if someone is praying, what we're learning from here is that if someone is praying by themselves, they don't need to do the 30 as part of their Mussaf prayer, which is what we would do if you're in the minyan. You would do 30 as part of your Mussaf prayer. You don't need to. You do 30 before and then pray Mussaf. How exactly that would work, Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll never have to experience it again. But I think the Batei Knesset were already open by then. I remember I was having lunch in 2020 at my in-laws, and someone was banging on the door and like, Rabbi, can you blow the shofar for me? And I said, I don't have a shofar. And I don't know how to blow a shofar. So I can't help you. That's what I told them. And they said, I thought all rabbis know how to blow shofar. And I said, you thought wrong. What can I say? Or maybe I'm not such a good rabbi. I don't know what to say. Okay. All right. Let's keep going with the Gemara. There are certain things that it's better not to know. Because once you know, then you get more headaches. I don't know. All right. I don't need to know I don't know how to blow shofar. Easier. Okay, let's go. What takes priority? Mussaf of shofar. I have a question for you. Let's say you can only do one. Now you have to come up with a case of why I could only do one. But let's say you could only do one. Mussaf or shofar. Which one should you do? Shofar. Why do you say shofar? It's a mitzvah from the Torah. Anyone have any other opinions?
I like to dissent.
You dissent, okay? Yes. Dissent against the lawyer. Very smart. He's wearing his St. John's School of Law.
There's also
yeah. Okay, there is a rule in Judaism that what's more common should come first. Yeah, not precedent, but it should come first. So, okay, very good. Maybe that's more of like a PEMDAS type of thing, like an order of operations. When you're going to do 2 things, which one comes first? PEMDAS. You do the one that's more common. Okay, that's the Jewish PEMDAS. You guys know what PEMDAS is, right? Man, that's like 3rd grade or something. No, maybe not so early. Maybe it's like 8th grade. But so this is a tadir v'sheino tadir. Tadir kodem tells you it comes first. But what if I told you could only do one? Now we have to construct the situation. But now, so Justin is saying shofar, but you know what? The Gemara is going to take it even further than that. And let's see it, because you're going to learn some very important rules here. Very important rules, okay? Am I sharing the screen? Yes, I am. Okay, next. Umitzvah betok'in yoter minam v'archin. The mitzvah is great. The mitzvah, or I guess the priority, would go with blowing the shofar over praying the Mussaf. Ketzad. What's the case? So the Gemara says, here's the case. Shtei ayarot. There's 2 cities. Be'achat tok'in u'achat mevarchin. You know that or think about it like this. Let's say there's 2 batei knesiyot. You know, in one kanisa, you have a guy who blows a shofar, but they don't have a CHAZZAN. We're talking about a time there's no sidur, and there's no CHAZZAN, but the guy is going to be there hanging up blowing shofar all day. Or you could go to the other Bet Knesset where you have a perfect CHAZZAN that he knows the tefillah, and he could pray, and you could follow along with him, but they don't have a shofar. Pick. Which one do you go to? And you can't go to both. So what do you do? Be'achat tokin v'achat mevarchin, holchin lemakom shetokin, ve'en holchin lemakom shemevarchin. So the Gemara tells us, you go to the place where they blow the shofar. So the CHAZZAN will be there by himself. That one, no one else should go there. Everyone should be going to the shofar. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Justin knew this without even learning this Gemara. Pshita, had the Raita, had the Rabbanan. It's obvious, of course. You have 2 things, one's from the Torah, one's not from the Torah. praying Mussaf, that prayer is not from the Torah. We learn, according to the Rambam, there's a mitzvah from the Torah to pray every day. But if you pray Shacharit, fulfill that obligation. So praying Mussaf is that one in particular is a rabbinic one. According to the Rambam, you pray once a day, you fulfill your Torah obligation. So it's obvious. The Gemara says, no, I'm going to take it a step further. You ready? Even though one of them is for certain and one of them is perhaps you'll fulfill it. What does that mean? Let's say the guy said he's going to blow the shofar at 10 a.m. or 9:30. You forgot. So now you're looking at your watch and you're saying, should I go there or should I? Oh, and the Mussaf guy said he's going to do it at 11 o'clock. If I go to the Mussaf guy, for sure I'm going to make it. For sure I'm going to make it. If I go to the shofar guy, I might miss it. I'm not sure. So now I might end up with nothing. If I go to the shofar place, I might get shofar, but I might end up with nothing. On the other hand, if I go to the Mussaf place, for sure I'm going to get Mussaf. You get it? So now 100% I'll get a rabbinic thing, or 50% I'll get a Doraita, a Torah law, Torah mitzvah. Which one should I do? Mitzvah b'tok'in. You should go for the shofar. You should go for the shofar. That's what we're saying. Even though it's a doubt, a safek mitzvah of Doraita takes precedent over a vadai, certain mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Very, very important rule. This sounds like something that you could probably elaborate on by giving a lot of examples, which we're not going to do. But you can imagine this is a very important rule because now you're learning about prioritization. And especially another thing we learn here is that Mussaf is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So at the end of the daf, hopefully we're going to see that there was someone that actually wouldn't pray every day, which is not because he was not religious. He's actually one of the Rabbanim. And we're going to see because he viewed that the part of the prayer was d'Rabbanan. So we're going to see it, Be'ezrat Hashem, we're going to get it to that. But it's important to see how mitzvah d'Oraita takes precedence over mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and even in a chance, a possibility of you doing a mitzvah d'Oraita takes precedence over a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Okay, now let's get to the third and final discussion of the entire Masechet, which is a topic for not just Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but really all prayers. I have a question for you, okay? I have a question. You go to Minyan, Shacharit. You have the CHAZZAN standing up there. He's praying, he prays Shacharit, the Chazarat HaShatz, right? We know our terms. The Chazara, when he repeats, it's called Chazarat HaShatz. Why is it called Chazarat HaShatz? Because it's the SHALIACH TZIBBUR, the CHAZZAN. It's called the SHALIACH TZIBBUR. Before that, everyone in the room prayed the Lachash, which is the silent Amidah. Why do we have this repetition? Okay, so you're saying for Kedusha. Okay, very good. For saying Nakdisha. Yeah, you're saying Nakdisha. Okay. Yes?
They didn't have Sidurim, still will be able to follow.
Oh, okay. So Itai is starting to get into it. Let's say somebody doesn't know how to pray. Because he doesn't have, let's say he doesn't have a Musa, he doesn't have a Sidur. Can he rely on the prayer of the Shaliach Tzibur? So that's what Itai is saying. Itai is saying, yeah, because if he doesn't know how to pray, to rely on his prayer. Okay? But what about nowadays? Both ways, my question is. Let's say I have a Sidur. Can I rely on his? Can I say I want to rely on him? Are you allowed to? Are you allowed to say I don't want to pray, I just want to listen to the CHAZZAN? Or if you say that everyone has a Sidur, can we just say, hey, we don't need to do the Chazara anymore? If the whole thing, Itai, what you're saying is that if it's for the person that doesn't know how to read, but let's say everyone knows how to read. Let's say you have the minyan here in the morning.
You will have Sidurim.
And we all have Sidurim. We all have Sidurim. So are you able to say that I don't want to do Chazara anymore? So let's go ahead and see how this is enacted, and let's go through every single thing. And I just want to share the screen to ask you some questions that we're going to discuss. Here, look at this. Can the CHAZZAN pray on behalf of all individuals? Now, does it depend on the person's knowledge or / expertise? Meaning, does it make a difference whether the person knows how to pray or the person doesn't know how to pray? So Itai said, hey, I don't know how to pray, so I'm going to listen to the CHAZZAN. Let's say I know how to pray, but I'm lazy. Or I'd rather listen to the CHAZZAN. He has a very nice voice. Am I allowed to opt in, or is it only if I don't know how to? That's the first question. Next, does it matter of like how difficult the prayers are? Would you say, oh, you can rely on the CHAZZAN for Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur because it's very long, but on a regular weekday, you can't? Would you make that distinction? Or would you say, no, if you're going to listen to him, you can listen to him, and you could use him for your prayer on any day of the week. That's this one versus that one. And then the last question is, does it matter what the location of the person is? Would you say that it only works if I'm in the room? Or would you say it works if I'm in the city but not in the room? Or would you say it works even if I'm not in the city? Let's say I'm on a plane and the CHAZZAN is praying. Can he have me in mind? Let's say I'm not there. Can the CHAZZAN have me in mind? Or do I have to be there? Do I have to be in the city? Do I have to be in the room? All of these questions, everything we're going to discuss right now. Okay? You ready? Final push of Masechet Rosh Hashana. Here we go. Let's go. כשם ששיח ציבור חייב, כך כל יחיד ויחיד חייב. We have a machloket between the Chachamim and Rabban Gamliel. Chachamim say, just as the CHAZZAN is chayav, so too every individual is chayav, meaning every individual has to pray. And what did Rabban Gamliel respond? Rabban Gamliel responded that the Shaliach Tzibur can fulfill the obligation for other people. That's the Mishnah we looked at right at the beginning of Shiur. Okay, it's very important. What does Chachamim say? What does Rabban Gamliel say? Tell me. What do Chachamim say? Chachamim say every individual has to pray. What does Rabban Gamliel say? You can rely on the Shaliach Tzibur. The CHAZZAN can pray for other people. Okay, we're going to go back and forth here between Chachamim and Rabban Gamliel. So I need this to be clear. Chachamim, everyone's got to pray by themselves. Rabban Gamliel, the CHAZZAN can do it for you. Okay, now they're going to talk at each other right now. They're going to have their arguments. Amru lo leRabban Gamliel. Chachamim said to Rabban Gamliel, "Hey, Rabban Gamliel, you're saying that the CHAZZAN can do it for everyone. So why are people even praying? You don't even have a prayer. Imagine that. Imagine we say Gal Yisrael Hashem Sefaday. You just go straight into it. People would love this. You know when they do one or two, or they say half. Okay, so that's what you would do. You just wouldn't do half. You would just go straight into it. Rabban Gamliel says you can rely on the CHAZZAN. So just go straight, rely on the CHAZZAN from the beginning. What do you need to do lachash for? Why do you need to have a rehearsal run? For what? Just listen to the CHAZZAN. So Amar Lahem, here's Rabban Gamliel's response. Kedei lahasdir shaliach tzibur tefilato. You know why? During that silent run, the CHAZZAN is preparing, rehearsing to make sure he knows the tefillah. Put yourself in a world where there's no sidurim. This word of kedei lahasdir means to arrange is the same word as sidur. So he has a practice run to rehearse the Amidah. Isn't that crazy? According to Rabban Gamliel, the reason we pray lachash is for the CHAZZAN to rehearse his Amidah. That's it. It's not for everyone to pray. This is what Rabban Gamliel says now. You're going to see that that's not the final answer. But Rav Moshe Feinstein has a very, very famous tshuva. Okay, anyone here go to Ashkenazi high school? You went to Ashkenazi high school?
No, I can just repeat that. So
Yes.
Saying Rabbi Gamliel's response is because like the first round in the morning is just for the CHAZZAN to like practice. That's it.
Correct. Okay.
To do it just for that.
Correct. Very good. Okay. So again, they're gonna. You know what? Let's just go to what each one's punch is. Okay. Chachamim say everyone's got to pray for themselves. Rabban Gamliel says no. Just the CHAZZAN can do it for everyone. So Chachamim asked the Rabban Gamliel, if you're telling me that CHAZZAN can do it for everyone, why do we even pray? Why do we have lachash? He says, oh, you know why? We have the lachash. It's just a dry run. It's a rehearsal for the CHAZZAN. That's Rabban Gamliel. What he's saying? He's saying the first lachash is just for the CHAZZAN to practice. Everyone is praying just to buy some time for the CHAZZAN to practice. That's what Rabban Gamliel's answer is. Seems a bit far-fetched. That's what the Rabban Gamliel's answer is. Now, what's Rabban Gamliel's attack on Chachamim? Amar lahem Rabban Gamliel edvarachem, according to you, that you say everyone has to pray for himself. Lama shaliach tzibur yored lifnei hativa. Why do you even have a CHAZZAN? You don't need a CHAZZAN. Let's just all get up and pray together. You're telling me everyone has to pray for himself. So let everyone pray for himself. You don't need to have a repetition. Amar lo. So they said back, kedei lehotzi et she'eno baki. You still need the CHAZZAN to read it to fulfill the mitzvah for people who don't know how to read. So yeah, everyone has to read, but if someone doesn't know how to read, they're going to rely on the CHAZZAN. That's what the Chachamim answer. Remember, Chachamim say everyone has to do it himself. So if everyone has to do it himself, Rabban Gamliel says, so why do you even need a CHAZZAN? You need a CHAZZAN for if someone doesn't know how to read. He says, but listen to what you're saying. You're saying if someone doesn't know how to read, the CHAZZAN can do it for him. CHAZZAN can do it for him, can do it for him. What difference does it make if this guy went to Hebrew school or not? the Chazan can do it for someone else, it works. That's his response. Just as he could fulfill the obligation for someone who doesn't know how to read, so too he fulfills the obligation for someone who knows how to read. The mechanism of him standing there and reading and fulfilling your obligation doesn't check your transcript. Do you know how to read this or not? If I can do it for you, I can do it for you. And if I can't, I can't. You're telling me that everyone has to do it because it doesn't work. So then why does he do it? Oh, he does it for someone who doesn't know how to read. If he could do it for someone who doesn't know how to read, he could do it for everyone, which is what I'm saying, is what Rabban Gamliel says. Okay, so here's the back and forth. I just wanted to say, this is a famous Shuvah of Moshe Feinstein. There's a famous question. Let's say you're in an Ashkenazi minyan. You're a Sephardi, and you read Sephardi. You go to an Ashkenazi minyan, and they ask you to be Chazan, which happened. When I was in Henke, it would happen all the time. They ask you to be Chazan. So now I'm going to be Chazan. Now, when you're Chazan for the Ashkenazi minyan, what do you read? Sephardi or Ashkenazi? You read Ashkenazi. Because you're an Ashkenazi minyan, you have to read Ashkenazi. Your Lachash, the one that you're reading to yourself, before you read it out loud in the Ashkenazi tune, should you read Sephardi or Ashkenazi? Okay, so you're saying Sephardi, you're saying Ashkenazi. So, based on our Gemara, what would you say? According to the Chachamim, the whole reason why we even have that first run is Kidei Lahasdir, so that the Chazan prepares and rehearses for his Amidah. So according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, he says this famously, it's a big tshuva, that you need to read what you're about to read out loud, you need to read to yourself. So a Sephardi who is an Ashkenazi minyan and is going to be Chazan, his Lachash should be Ashkenazi when he is Chazan. But if he's not Chazan, then his Lachash should be Sephardi. You get it? Get it?
You're an Ashkenazi minyan, but you're not the Chazan.
Yes.
You should read your own.
You should read your own. Correct. If I am just a guy sitting in row 12B, then yes, you should pray Sephardi. But if they invite you to be Chazan and you're going to be reading Ashkenazi for the Chazara, then for the Lachash, you should also read Ashkenazi, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein. There's others that argue that say, no, you should read your own way. And then others say that the Sephardim are always right. So if you ever have an opportunity to pray Sephardi, you should pray Sephardi, no matter what. That's what others would say. But this is a very famous Shuvah that Moshe Feinstein gives. Okay, let's keep going. Good? Now we have the final question.
So we just left that. It's done.
It's a machloket. Okay, but it's not. We're not done yet. Okay, so you have a machloket between Rabban Gamliel and Chachamim. Chachamim say what? Everyone has to pray for themselves. Rabban Gamliel says you could rely on the Chazan. So we have a machloket. Each one throws a punch, and so far it sounds like so good. Rabban Gamliel wants to defend his position that everyone can read for himself. So he says, well, we wouldn't even have a Chazan. Not everyone, that the Chazan can do for everyone. And he says the very fact that you have a Chazan, that you're saying that it's going to work for someone, it could work for everyone. That's what Rabban Gamliel says. Chachamim say, no, it doesn't work for someone who knows how to read. So why do we have the Lachash to begin with? So that he could practice. Now look at this. If you thought a machloket, this is amazing. We're going to have a machloket, whether there's a machloket. Okay? I don't know how that even makes sense. But here, it's like very meta. Let's see it. Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Here is a statement made in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Modim Chachamim l'Rabban Gamliel. Chachamim agree to Rabban Gamliel. So meaning, what Rabbi Yochanan is telling us is that the Chachamim agreed to Rabban Gamliel, and Rabban Gamliel won. He won the battle. Okay, so there's no machloket. The Rav Amar, but Rav says, Adayin hi machloket. No, they still argue. Oh, Vela. Okay, so you have a machloket, and I have a machloket if there's still a machloket. You have a machloket between Rabban Gamliel and Chachamim, then Rabbi Yochanan says, no, they agree, and Rav says, no, they still argue. So there's a machloket, and then there's a machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav, whether there's still a machloket or not. Okay? Shamar Rabbi Chia b'rei Rabba bar Nachmani. One time, Rabbi Chia heard this. Rabbi Chia heard this discussion that Rabbi Yochanan says they agreed. Again, Chachamim agreed with Rabban Gamliel, and Rav says they argued. So Azal Amran l'shma'ata kamed Rav Dimi bar Chinina. So he went and he told this discussion of Rabbi Yochanan, told it to Rav Dimi. What did Rav Dimi say? Amar le He responds, Hachi Amar Rav. Rav says, Adain hi machloket. Yeah, we said that already. Meaning, but he says, I hold by Rav. Rav told me, still a machloket. So you're saying that Rabbi Yochanan says that they agreed. No, Rav says they're still arguing. Amar le Rabba Bar Chana Nami Hachi Kamar. He says, yeah, Rabba Bar Chana also said this. See, Amar Rabbi Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He also said this, but there's something else that he said. Ki Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hashma'ata. When Rabbi Yochanan said this, Ifliga le Reish Lakish ve'Amar. Reish Lakish argued with him and said, Adani machloket. It's still a machloket. So we just have another party entering Reish Lakish that says the machloket stands. Okay, so you have a machloket, Rabban Gamliel Chachamim. Now you have second level machloket, whether they still have a machloket. Rabbi Yochanan says they came to peace. Chachamim agree with Rabban Gamliel. Rav says no, they didn't come to peace. Rabbi Yochanan and Chachamim argue, and Reish Lakish says they argue. So there still is a machloket. Okay. Now Rabbi Yochanan said there's no machloket, but we have a problem. What's our problem? You have another statement of Rabbi Yochanan that said something else. What did Rabbi Yochanan say elsewhere? Umi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan really say this, that there is no machloket? The Amar Rav Chana Sipura'a Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. By the way, incidentally, as I was reading this, I asked you, what's your daughter's name? Chana. Chana is a girl's name, right? But this rabbi's name is Rabbi Chana. Very interesting. Just something that came to my mind. Chana was one of the Nevi'im, was one of the Nevi'ot. She was in the whole story of Shmuel. Chana was Shmuel's mother. Chana, but it's Rabbi Chana, okay? Rabbi Chana Tzipora, Rabbi Chana from the area of the city of Tzipori, said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hilcheta Keraban Gamliel. Okay, now let's understand this. Rabbi Yochanan is quoted saying that the law is like Rabban Gamliel. If you say halakha is like Rabban Gamliel, what does that imply? There's an argument. So first, Rabbi Yochanan said the Chachamim agreed with Rabban Gamliel. Then later, Rabbi Chana quotes Rabbi Yochanan to say, we follow Rabban Gamliel. When you say the halakha is like Rabban Gamliel, hilchita michlal de pligi. That means they argue. So in one hand, Rabbi Yochanan says they agree, but on the other hand, he's picking a side. If he's picking a side, that implies that they disagree. Turning to the top of Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, Ki Salik Rabbi Abba miyameh. One time, Rabbi Abba was traveling at sea, and when he returned from traveling at sea, Persha, he explained it as follows: Modim Chachamim l'Rabban Gamliel b'brachot shel Rosh Hashana v'shel Yom Kippurim. No, you know what it is? Chachamim argue with Rabban Gamliel on a regular weekday, but on a regular weekday, Chachamim say everyone has to pray for themselves because everyone prays every day. They should pray for themselves. But on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when the prayers are so unique and so long, then Chachamim will agree with Rabban Gamliel. So now we're re-shifting it. That Chachamim agree with Rabban Gamliel that the CHAZZAN can pray for you on unique days, like Yom Kippur. That you have a Seder Avodah that takes 2 hours long. Or on Rosh Hashanah, that the Mussaf is so long that people don't know how to do it. What do you want from them? So on those days, Chachamim agree with Rabban Gamliel that the CHAZZAN can do it for everyone. But on regular weekdays, Chachamim say, you're praying 3 times a day. Why is the CHAZZAN going to do it for you? I don't allow it. Okay? That's how Rabbi Abba explained it when he came back from his cruise trip. He was at sea. He comes back from sea. One time he says, "Oh no, I'll explain it to you. Very simple. When we say that they agree, you know how come this one says they agree, this one says no, they argue. This one says they agree, this one says no, they argue. I'll tell you why. Because they agree by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but they argue by the other days. Okay? The halacha Michlal de pligi bebrachot techol shana. When we said that the halacha, that Rabbi Yochanan says halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, but Chachamim would argue, that is for the brachot of the rest of the year, regular weekdays. But is that the case? Okay, you thought you had your solution, but I have another problem with that, because you have another statement by Rabbi Chana. Amar Rabbi Chana Tzipora, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rabban Gamliel. The law is like Rabban Gamliel, and when I say the law is like Rabban Gamliel, that means they argue. But he says specifically, the brachot shel Rosh Hashanah v'shel Yom Kippurim. By Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the law is like Rabban Gamliel, meaning that Chachamim argue with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim also. So you thought, you Rabbi Abba came and you said, oh, I know, they agree by Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. No, but Rabbi Yochanan said the law is like Rabban Gamliel, halacha is like Rabban Gamliel and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur also. Meaning the Chachamim argue on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So here we go. Ela Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. I have one simple answer, and once I say that, everything falls into place. What is it? Man Modim, who agrees? Rabbi Meir. There's two Chachamim. Chachamim here is used as the dissenting opinion from Rabban Gamliel. So you have Rabban Gamliel, and then you have Chachamim. But there's two other parties in this argument, meaning it's a three-way machloket. It's a three-way machloket. That's what we're going to say. And Rabbi Meir is the one that agrees with Rabban Gamliel, but not the Chachamim of our Mishnah. Here what it is. Man Modim, who agrees? Rabbi Meir. V'halacha michlad pligi, Rabbanan. But when we say that they argue, it's Rabbanan. So now, basically what we're saying is, and we're going to see the Braita is going to go through it. The Tanya, we learned in the Braita. Brachot shel Rosh Hashana v'shel Yom Kippurim. The blessings of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Shaliach Tzibbur motzi harabim midei chovatan. The Shaliach Tzibbur can do it for you. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the words of Rabbi Meir, who agrees with Rabban Gamliel by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur only. Chachamim אומרים, Chachamim say, כשם ששליח ציבור חייב, כך כל יחיד ויחיד חייב. Chachamim say, no, even on Rosh Hashanah, you need to have praying. Every individual needs to do it by themselves. What's the difference between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Is it because there's a lot of... Okay, so hold on, let me just quickly, let's quickly do this, like a chart, okay? Insert a table. I usually use Excel, but let's just do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 3 columns and we'll have 3 rows. Here is Chachamim. This is Rabbi Meir. And this is Rabban Gamliel. Okay? So now, oh, I need one more. Sorry. Insert column to the left. So now, what? Yeah, sorry. It's okay, it's not bad. Weekdays, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, okay? So what we're going to say is, CHAZZAN can pray for everyone, okay? Rabban Gamliel says this across the board. He says this for weekdays and for Rosh Hashanah. Okay, every individual must pray. He says this. Chachamim say that across the board. And Rabbi Meir for Rosh Hashanah, for weekdays, says every individual must pray. But for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he says the CHAZZAN can pray for everyone. So when we say how they agree, they don't agree, it depends on who you're talking and what you're talking about. So when you say that they agree with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's talking about Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabban Gamliel for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And when you say the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel for Yom Kippur, that's because Chachamim argue on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and they say every individual must pray. This is what ends up being the final way that they all stack up. Chachamim say every individual must pray always. Rabban Gamliel says the CHAZZAN can pray for others always. Rabbi Meir is going to differentiate between weekdays and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So now we're going to ask, according to Rabbi Meir, who differentiates between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, why? Why would you differentiate between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and the rest of the year? So is it because there's a lot of psukim? That can't be it. My Shanahani. What's the difference between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Is it because because it has a lot of psukim in it, and maybe you don't know the psukim? Rav told us a rule that the kevan she'amar uvtoratcha katuv lemor shuv eno tzarich. Rav says push comes to shove. Remember we did a whole grid. This is according to Tosfot. I'm going to explain according to Tosfot. We had a whole grid. You need to have 10 psukim from Torah, 10 psukim from 10 psukim for Shofarot, 10 psukim for Zichronot, 10 from Malchiot, 3 from Torah, 3 from Ketuvim, 3 from Nevi'im, 1 from Shofar. That whole grid of all of those 30 psukim you have to read. Rav says, push comes to shove. If all you need to say is of Toratcha katuv lemor. The Torah says this also. That's enough. Shuv eno tzarich. According to Rav, that'll work. So Tosfot tells us there was one opinion that says you shouldn't do less than 10. The other one says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says you shouldn't do less than 7. We had another opinion that says you shouldn't do less than 3. But Rav says that's once you start opening your mouth and saying the psukim. But if you don't know and you just say, that's enough. That's the opinion of Rav. So is that the reason, because of the psukim? Is that why Rabbi Meir would differentiate between Rosh Hashanah and the rest of the year? Can't be, because you could say it very easily. Ela, you know why? It's not because of that. Mishum de avshe brachot, because there's so many more brachot. You have malchiot, zichronot, shofarot. Even if you didn't have to say all of those psukim, there's more brachot, there's more things to say, there's more things to do. I don't know it. So on a day like that, Rabbi Meir would say you could rely on the CHAZZAN's prayer, but on a weekday, you cannot rely on the CHAZZAN's prayer. Okay? I'm going to pause there for a second. Any questions? Okay, let's go. We're almost done. Gufa. That's, by the way, I should say, the Gemara says, is it because there's so many psukim? Can't be. Because Rav says you could just say, it says this in the Torah. You get what I'm saying? How instead of quoting all of the psukim, Rav just says, it says it in your Torah. You know, like, anyone know watch a Fiddler on the Roof? And like, what's his name? Tuvia? At some point he says, like the good book says, and then at one point he says, well, I don't need to tell you what the good book says. Right? As because he has these conversations that he talks to God. Between himself, he talks to God. And he always tells people, like the good book says, quoting the Torah. And then once he's talking to God by himself, and he says, I don't need to tell you what the good book says. That's exactly what Rav says. Rav says, when you're praying in the Amidah, and you want to quote the psukim, you could just say, that's what you wrote. You wrote this yourself, like the good book says.
Fragment of a sentence. So says in the Torah. What? What does it say?
Yeah, it is like a fragment.
Written in your Torah.
Yeah, exactly.
Already.
You're translating the word lemor as saying quote, and then you're waiting for a quote, and then he's leaving you hanging.
There's no open bracket.
But there's no, yeah. It's more like that's it says it in your Torah. That's it. And Rav is saying that's enough. You could as long as you say it's written in the Torah, that's enough. That's the way Rav wants to say it. The way I explained it to you, that these are all talking about the psukim of Rosh Hashana. Rashi ends up explaining it a little bit differently, that these are talking about the psukim of Mussaf. Let's say we're praying a Mussaf prayer, you say all of the animals of the Mussaf. That all you go through that, and Rosh Hashanah you go through all of the korbanot of the Mussaf. Rashi says for that you could have just said but what's odd about that is that it's not that many psukim comparatively speaking, but that's what Rashi focuses on, because our Mishnah says you need to do a minimum of 10 psukim, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says a minimum of 7 psukim. So what do you do? Is Rav coming and saying don't even say anything? So you have different opinions. Yes, question.
Just asking, so like you would do like the first 3, and then instead of the entirety of Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofar, you just say that one line, and then you start that's it.
No. Well, the way the Siddur works, I don't want to open it up now. But like, for example, the section on Zichronot, it says, Ata zocher kol hanishkachot, you remember all of this, you remember everything that happened, you don't forget anything, and everything is done, and that comes before you, and on this day, everything is reviewed. As it writes in your Torah, boom, boom, boom. As it writes in your Ketuvim, boom, boom, boom. As it writes in your Nevi'im, boom, boom, boom. As it writes in your Torah, this, ki ata zocher kol hanishkachot, ata, and then you end up by saying you remember everything. Baruch Hashem, zocher habrit. I'm not sure if that's a bracha, but I think that's what it is. And then you blow the shofar. So you still have to say the topic of zichronot. Just instead of actually quoting for those sections, you don't need a quote. You could just say, and it's written there, see there. Hashem, see the Torah. You'll see it. It's there. That's basically what Rav says. According to Tosot, that's how Rav understands it. The same with according to Rashi, the sections of the Mussaf. You don't need to quote it. You could just say, it says it in the Torah. Okay? Just remember Tevya. What's his name? Tevya. Like the good book says. I don't need to tell you what the good book says. I'm sure someone can find a clip for us on YouTube and send it to the chat. Okay, let's conclude. You had a question or you're okay, just a scratch. Okay. Here we go. Gufa. let's go back and understand this statement about how you could just simply say, oh, it says it in the Torah. Gufa, Rav Chanan, Amar Rav Chanan, Amar Rav, Kevan she'amar Toratcha katuv lemor. Once you say that, so is written in your Torah, shuv eino tzarich. You don't need to actually quote the psukim. Savur mina, he thought to say, Hani mili biyachid. That only applies when you're alone. Let's say you're alone, you don't have a sidur, you don't know all of the psukim. In this situation, you say, v'chen katuv b'toratach, or toratcha katuv lemor. It says it in your Torah. But aval b'tzibur lo. Initially, he thought to say you can't do that as part of a minyan. Itmar, but then then there was a statement. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, echad yachid ve'echad tzibur. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says it doesn't matter, an individual or a minyan. Kevan she'amar of toratcha katuv lemor. Once he says, so it is written in your Torah. Shuv eino tzarich. You don't need to actually quote the psukim. Minimum. If you just say it's in your Torah, that's enough to fulfill your obligation, and you don't actually need to quote, both for an individual and for a minyan. Okay. Finally, I just want to say a word about halacha of whether we actually rely on the question of can the CHAZZAN pray on behalf of all individuals. The answer is the CHAZZAN indeed can pray on your behalf. But what halacha says is that you have to listen to the person has to have you in mind, and you have to answer amen to every bracha. So practically speaking, it's very, very difficult, because that means if you want the CHAZZAN to say the Amidah on your behalf, and you're in the room, what you need to do is you need to stand there, listen to the CHAZZAN, and when the CHAZZAN says something, say amen. And have in mind to be fulfilling the obligation without a lapse in your concentration. It's a lot easier to read it than to not lapse in concentration at all. And what the halakha says is that nowadays that we have a sidur, you should just read for yourself. But if there's a situation where, let's say someone doesn't know how to read. We see this is the halakha follows Rabban Gamliel. Even the Chachamim would agree to that. Or there are situations where, let's say, I'll give you an example that comes up a lot. Let's say, for example, someone doesn't know how to say Birkat HaMazon, or someone doesn't know how to say Bracha V'al HaMechiyah. You can do it for someone else. If someone knows how to say it, it's better that they say it themselves. When it comes to these long-form tefillot, Birkat HaMazon, everyone should say it for themselves. But if someone doesn't know how to say it, you tell them, no problem, listen, I'll say it, and you answer amen, but the person has to listen, the person has to pay attention. Okay, there we go. Let's conclude. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Now we're going back to the topic that we said that you need to prepare your tefillah before you say it. Okay? According to the Chachamim, that's why we even have the lachash. We have the lachash because you shouldn't go into a tefillah without ever having seen it before. Which, quite frankly, that's usually what happens. There's many people that the first time that they see the Mussaf prayer of Yom Kippur is when we say Kaddish and you start Mussaf Yom Kippur. But the halakha that we're saying now, Rabbi Elazar says, Le'olam yastir adam tefilato. First, you should organize the prayer, then you should pray. Amar Rabbi Abba, mistabra milta, Rabbi Elazar, bebrachot shel Rosh Hashana v'shel Yom Kippurim v'shel Parakim. What he's saying, that you should rehearse and review the prayers beforehand, it makes sense by the unique prayers of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and for things that are periodic. Parakim means once in a while, like, I don't know, maybe Mussaf of Rosh Chodesh, once a month, maybe Shavuot prayer, maybe for Sukkot prayer, once in a while. So before you do it, you should remind yourself what it is. Avad Dechol Hashanah, but the brachot of every single day, you don't need to. You could just roll into the prayer. You could just pray Amidah. You don't need to review it before you pray. Okay, so you see what Rabbi Elazar is telling you is, before you pray an Amidah prayer, you need to practice it. And Rabbi Abba is telling him, but not if it's a regular weekday. We're talking about if it's a special prayer. If it's like a Mussaf of Rosh Hashanah, or a Mussaf of Rosh Chodesh, which comes once in a month. Okay, so prepare beforehand. But if it's something that you say every single day, you don't need to. By the way, I'm just going to jump ahead and already tell you the halakha. According to the Ramah, who's Ashkenazi, according to the Ramah, this mitzvah only applied to when they did not have sidurs. Right? This lashon is olam yasdir adam Tefillah, a person should rehearse the tefillah. It's from the word of a sidur. Meaning, if you don't have a sidur, so before you pray, this happens sometimes. Before you pray, just make sure you know what it is. Don't get stuck in the middle of the prayer and then now you're stuck. You already started the Amidah. You know what I'm talking about? You're in the middle of the Amidah and you're saying it by heart. This happens when people are saying Kaddish sometimes. In the middle of the Kaddish, they just get stuck. The guy says Kaddish maybe 400 times, but it happens. You just get stuck. So what you're supposed to do before you pray is to rehearse it. So Rabbi Abba says, okay, but that's not with the prayers that you do every single day. That's with the unique ones, right? The unique ones you should practice beforehand. Halacha now tells us, but since we have Sidurim nowadays, you don't even need to do it anymore. Because you have the Sidur. It's good, it's always good to practice beforehand, to prepare beforehand, but you don't need to. Okay, now, the statement that Rabbi Abba said, that he said, it's only for the special tefillot, we have an issue. Ini, is that the case? Rabbi Yehuda was a rabbi. Misader tzilote umsaleh. Every single time he would pray, he would practice beforehand. He would prepare his tefillah before he would pray every single time. What does that sound like? How frequently did he do it? Every day. So Rabbi Abbas says you only have to do it for the ones that's once in a while, but not every day. Rabbi Yehuda would do it every day. But here is the tricky part of Rabbi Yehuda. Shani Rabbi Yehuda was different. You know why? Kevan de mitlatin yomin, mitlatin yomin hava mitzaleh. He would only pray once a month. Kiparakim dameh. So for him, he would only pray once every 30 days. Then once every 30 days, when he would pray, he would have to prepare his tefillot beforehand. What? Why is Rabbi Yehuda only praying once every 30 days? So Rashi explains that he had a very strict regimen, a strict cycle, that he would go through his entire Torah from beginning to end once a month. So once a month, he would finish all of the Torah, all of the Mishnayot, and all of the Gemarot, and all of the Tana, everything he would finish. He had a monthly cycle, and he would go through everything once a month. He didn't have time to pray. Okay, are you allowed to choose that? Very interesting question, no? You can imagine there's a lot of discussion on this. Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't pray every day. Rabbi Yehuda would pray once a month. So Ramban says from here that you see really it's not, you're not required to pray every day. Ramban argues with Rambam. At the beginning of the class, I said, according to the Rambam, we have a mitzvah from the Torah to pray every day. Once a day. Mussaf of something is the Rabbanan, as you said, is Rabbanan. But to pray every day, according to the Rambam, is from the Torah. The Ramban says no, it's a rabbinic mitzvah. And Rabbi Yehuda decided not to do this because he was studying Torah, which is a mitzvah from the Torah. So he chose to do mitzvah of the Torah. Others say, no, time out. When we say he wouldn't pray every day, saying he wouldn't pray a full Amidah, but he would still say something. He would still say the Shema Yisrael he had to say. He would still do Barachat Kriyat Shema. So this is what some of the opinions say, that those things count for your prayer to fulfill your obligation of praying every single day. Or even just saying a short tefillah k'tzara, saying, Ribono Shel Olam, keep me healthy. That is enough to fulfill your mitzvah from the Torah. So this is something very important to know. According to the Rambam, you have to pray once a day and you have to pray the Amidah. But let's say someone is not going to do it for whatever reason, they should at least do some form of prayer every single day to fulfill your mitzvah by saying Shema Yisrael and saying a prayer like, Ribono Shel Olam, help me to be healthy. Hashem, help me for this. Hashem, bless me with this. This is part of your tefillot. Yes, question?
Where in the Torah what's praying?
Okay, Itai's question is, what's the source from the Torah that you have to pray? What?
Yeah.
It is. It's from the Shema Yisrael. Very good. What did you say?
Serving Hashem.
Serving Hashem? Correct. So it's Masechet Ta'anit Daf Bet Amud Aleph. It's Ta'anit, the first page. It says, it was the last one, right? Right, exactly. It says, V'hayam Shamot Yishmael Mitzvotay Hashem Nachim Sevet Chayim La'ahava Et Adonai Elohechem Ulovdo, to love God and to serve Him B'chol Levalchem U'chol Nafshechem, with your entire heart and entire soul. The Gemara says you have to serve Hashem with your entire heart. Ezohi Avodah Shebalev. How can you serve God with your heart? The Gemara says Zohi Tefillah. That's through prayer. So based on that, the Rambam takes this Gemara from Ta'anit and says this is a mitzvah from the Torah. The Torah says Ulovdo B'chol Levalchem, to serve Him with your entire heart. Zoi tefillah. So that's the ta'anit tafbet. Okay, so it's good. At the end of Rosh Hashana, you're asking a question about the ta'anit at the beginning of ta'anit. Okay, it's good. We always have to review. Let's finish up. Let's finish up the Masechet. Okay, Amar Rabbi Acha bar Avira Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida. This is it. This is the last thing. Now we're going to ask you the question about, let's say people are not coming to the Bet Knesset. Okay, Rabban Gamliel said that the CHAZZAN could fulfill the obligation for others. Well, what happens if the guy is not even in the room? Am shebesadot. Am shebesadot is the way Chazal or the Tanaim explain people that live out in the fields, meaning they're not in the city. Give me an example of what you would call am shebesadot nowadays. Let's say a guy who's traveling, a guy is in a business trip, the guy's in the middle of Kansas, the guy, just in a hotel, the guy is going to Vietnam, the guy is going to Thailand, something. The thing is, there's Chabad in all of these places. But let's say there's no minyan. Let's say he doesn't know how to pray. Am shebesadot, the people that are in the fields, the kfarim. Yeah, so that's another example. Yeah, exactly. People that are out working in the fields, they're not in the minyan. So the question is, can the CHAZZAN? So now the question is, when Rabban Gamliel says that the CHAZZAN can do it for everyone, which is what Rabban Gamliel says, do you have to be in the room or not? You get the question?
You answered this already.
I didn't go through the whole thing.
Yeah, I know, but you were saying like you have to pay attention.
So let's see. Amar Rabbi Acha, Amar Rav Acha bar Avira, Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida, Hoter haya Rabban Gamliel, afilu am shebesadot. Rabban Gamliel will have the CHAZZAN fulfilling the mitzvah and exempting the prayers of even the people that are out in the field. They're not in the room. They're not hearing me. The CHAZZAN's prayer works for him. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. When you say even the people outside, does that include the people who are in the city but are not coming to the Bet Knesset? You get what he's asking? He's saying, okay, I got it. You're telling me people that are out in Omaha, that there's no minyan next to them, so the CHAZZAN will cover his prayer. But what about the guy who lives next door and he just decides he's lazy, he doesn't come to Kanisa? Does it work for him? Does that include people that are here local but they choose not to come? It shouldn't work for them. Why? Because the people that are far away, it's not their fault. They're what's called anus. What does anus mean? It's circumstances out of their control. This is where they're stuck. They can't come here. But the guy who's next door, he's not anus. He's lazy. He has the choice. It's in his control to come. The Tani Abba Rav Binyamin Barchia. Where do we see this concept? Here's where we see it. We see it with Birkat Kohanim. Am she'acharei Kohanim einam bichlal beracha. Here's the rule that we learn by Birkat Kohanim. When the Kohanim are doing their Birkat Kohanim, we don't have a Kohen here tonight. When the Kohanim are putting their hands up, if you are behind the Kohen, you do not get the bracha of the Kohanim. So what are you supposed to do? Go stand in front of the Kohanim, or on their side at least. But if you're behind them, it doesn't work. This happens in some minyanim. Even on my minyan on Shabbat, sometimes the Kohanim, they come in like a rectangular, and there's a lot of them. They'll stand here. You'll have people that's standing in front of them. This is what this halakha is saying. Am she'acharei Kohanim, people that are standing behind the Kohanim, the bracha does not apply to them. However, the Gemara tells us elsewhere, I believe it's in Gemara Masechet Nedarim, the Gemara tells us elsewhere, but if the guy can't come to the Bet Knesset because he's not doing well, he's sick or something like that, the bracha of the Kohanim will go to them. So see, here you have the same situation. If you're home because you can't come, the bracha of the Kohanim will get to you. But if you're just behind the Kohen and you're just too lazy to walk around, which I've seen, you're too lazy to walk around, and the bracha doesn't come to you. So you see there are times where the further you are, the better it is. If you're not in the Bet Knesset, the Kohanim's blessing comes to you. But if you're in the Bet Knesset and you're just on the side, the bracha won't come to you. So the further you are, the better it is. So the Gemara wants to say, Rabban Gamliel allows the CHAZZAN to pray for people that are am shebesadot, people that are out in the fields. But what about the people that are not in the fields? They're locals. They just didn't come. Does it work for them? So Ela Kiyata Ravin, when Ravin came, Amar Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida, he quoted this opinion that said, Lo patar Rabban Gamliel, Ela Am Shebesadot. Rabban Gamliel only said that the CHAZZAN can fulfill the obligation for people who are, it's beyond their control, the people that are out on their business trip, Am Shebesadot. Mai Ta'ama, what's the reason? Mishum de Anisei b'mlacha, because it's beyond their circumstances, beyond their control, because they're involved with their work. Aval ba'ir, but people who are in the city and are choosing not to come, lo, it does not work. So now here, this is something that's very important to say that, let's say you're a CHAZZAN. Next time you go up and you're a CHAZZAN, you should have in mind, because you're seeing this right here from Rabban Gamliel, you should have in mind, I'll fulfill this obligation for anyone in this room, but more likely than not, everyone who's in the room is praying. Who should you really have in mind? The Am Shebesadot, the people that are not coming to Bet Knesset. The people that are too far to come to Bet Knesset, they would want to, their heart would want to, but they can't because they're too far. Okay, so this is a very important perspective of the CHAZZAN's prayers. So, Justin, as I said before, halacha l'maaseh, the way the halacha is that if you want to fulfill your obligation through the CHAZZAN, what should you do? You should listen to the CHAZZAN word for word. But Rabban Gamliel, the truth is, Rabban Gamliel says the prayer of the CHAZZAN works well beyond just who could hear. His prayer is for everyone. His prayer is for even people that are not in the room, as long as they're not at fault. You know what's very interesting is the Gemara says someone who is traveling for work is not at fault. I mean, why not? Like what? Maybe, I guess there's a fine line between this is my profession, this is how I have to make money, and this is what the job requires me to do. Or someone whose entire life is running after money. Then is it really out of his control? Well, sometimes it is in your control, but you're choosing to become a workaholic. You don't need it. That extra million maybe is not enough of an excuse. So obviously it's going to depend on the situation. But the point is, if you have a valid excuse, the prayer of the CHAZZAN will apply and it will cover you. If you don't have a valid excuse, then it will not cover you. Okay, this is it. Baruch Hashem, we finished the Masechet, but we're going to do the final siyum elsewhere. But this is it. Baruch Hashem, we've concluded. Okay, Mazal Tov everyone. Mazal Tov, B'ezrat Hashem. Well, now we'll take a few minutes to discuss the siyum, and I'm going to stop the recording here. B'ezrat Hashem. Hazak Baruch, everyone.
Hazak Baruch. Thank you, Rabbi.
Hazak Baruch. Yes, question?
I only say it in the plural, meaning like we're praying on behalf of people that do not.
Yeah, that's very good. The prayer of the Amidah is set up in the plural. So it's set up for the formula is for the CHAZZAN to say it, to have everyone in mind. That's how it's set up. But we as individuals read it also. At least you have that unique opinion of the Chachamim that the only reason why we're reading it is for the CHAZZAN to rehearse so that he can read it. So, but you do see how the tefillah was set up as a communal prayer. Okay, Hazak Baruch, everyone. Hazak Baruch, B'ezrat Hashem. Next Masechet Rosh Hashana. We're done with Masechet Rosh Hashana. Sorry, next Masechet Brachot. We'll start very soon in Gedol. Hazak Baruch, Hazak Baruch. Yeah. Okay, sure. Let me. Did I stop the? It's still recording? How do you know?
Yes, you're still recording.
Which left? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Hazak Baruch.